I'd like to call to order this Working Board of Education meeting on Monday, May 5th at 7:02. We'll have a roll call, please.
Ms. Garrison?
Here.
Ms. Cartha?
Here.
Mr. Rickus?
Here.
Ms. Chow?
Here.
And Ms. Quattrocki?
Here. Our first action item is the approval of the agenda. Richard?
I move that the Board of Education approve the May 5th, 2014 regular board meeting agenda with an amendment to include approval of the letter regarding the conceal and carry law drafted by the board.
Second.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Cartha?
Yes.
Mr. Rickus?
Yes.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
And Ms. Quattrocki?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. We will now go on to the approval of the conceal and carry letter that we did discuss last board meeting. So if we're all in agreement, I think we can pass the letter, approve the letter, and then we intend to write a resolution that we'll bring to the board on the 19th.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education approve the letter regarding the Illinois Conceal and Carry Law to be sent to the Illinois General Assembly.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Cartha? Yes. Mr. Rickus?
Yes.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
Ms. Quattrocki?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Don't sit down, Laura, we'll be done before you. I'm kidding. Now we're on to the election of officers. Candace?
Oh, I'm sorry. I move that the Board of Education appoint Barb Hiller as the President Pro Tem to chair the meeting until the Board President is elected.
Second.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Cartha? Yes. Mr. Rickus?
Yes.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
And Ms. Quattrocki?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0.
One board member submitted a statement of interest to serve as the board president. I request a motion to accept the nomination and elect Ms. Quattrocki as board president.
Second?
I'll second.
Oh, we have to make a motion.
Oh, never
So
mind.
I move to accept the nomination and elect Ms. Quattrocki as board president.
There's more to it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I'm
you're
so
stealing my
sorry.
thunder here.
Superseding.
Go ahead, why don't you read it? I blew it.
I move that the Board of Education accept the nomination and elect Ms. Quattrocki as board president to serve until the reorganization meeting of the board in May 2015.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Cartha?
Yes.
Mr. Rickus?
Yes.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
And Ms. Quattrocki?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. I had a speech prepared, but I will skip it tonight. But thank you all. I appreciate your support, and it has been a pleasure working with all of you. And I think it's an exciting time to be on the board. Richard? And Ms. Garrison? Claudia, you're,
No, it's
Mr.
you.
Rickert, okay, Mr. Rickert submitted a statement of interest to serve as the board vice president. I request a motion to accept the nomination and elect Mr. Rickus as board vice president.
I move that the Board of Education accept the nomination and elect Mr. Rickus as board vice president to serve until the reorganization meeting of the board in May 2015.
Second.
I'll second. Oh, guess that's okay then.
Yes. Roll call, please.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Cartha?
Yes.
Mr. Rickus?
Yes.
Ms. Chow?
Yes.
And Ms. Quattrocki?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Now we're on to our discussion items. Oh, first of all, anyone who would like to address the board? Ellen? Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, now we are, the order of our discussion items, one is sort of an outgrowth of the first is an outgrowth of the second, but we will keep it in that order even though it makes more, not that that's anyone's fault, just in looking at it. The Joint District 265 and 202 Achievement Report was an idea that came about in the committee after the Kellogg presentation, because there was a lot of talk about how you merge departments, how the collaboration efforts sort of go up the chain of command even to the very top rungs. And there was an idea that maybe the board's role in all of this was to set a goal, and then the departments or the districts would figure out the best way for this report to be generated and how to work together. So we have come up with the idea In both of our policies, it is a requirement to have an achievement report once a year, even though in 65, it has to come to the board. In 202, it's not as explicit about reporting to the board. So the idea is to amend both policies to say that there needs to be a joint achievement report each year. And then at the joint meeting in June, we want to really put some meat on that and talk about what that achievement report would look like and how extensive. Is it program analysis? Is it just sort of at the highest levels, or do we really want to get down into more specific programs? But the first step would be amending our policy, which would include a phrase that would suggest that we would have a joint achievement report. So I just want to comment on it, the board to be aware of this is the way we're moving, thoughts on. And then we want to open it up to a broader discussion of how to respond to the Kellogg study in a more sort of coherent way.
So this achievement, just a question, I guess, it sounds like a good idea. The achievement report would be like, okay, we have the joint literacy goal, how we're doing on the goals that we set, or would it be broader than that?
I think it would be broader than that, because when we have had our program analysis, it's always ended in 8th grade. And we have not seen, for instance, because of the data sharing, the complexity of all that, we haven't tracked the TWE students through 12th grade, the accelerated math students through 12th grade, the kids who are struggling, what happens in the transition years. So it's the idea to really do a K through 8, 12 report. So we're really tracking the kids through their whole journey through both districts. That's the goal.
So would this be an additional report that happens in June, in addition to what we usually get as our achievement report, or would it just be looking, I mean,
I think the
it'd just
hope
be
is
one report, right?
The idea is we're not trying to make more work, so we don't want to add to the calendar. When we started talking about how do we look at this work jointly, we don't want to add more to the calendar, we just want to replace our individual achievement report with a joint report.
So, but that means then we wouldn't get it until June?
No, I think Tracy was saying June, meaning at our joint board meeting in this, actually, I think we did talk about that in January. So in June, we were going to agree, implement the new policies, the revised policies, and then in January, really flesh out what would be the questions that we would want answered through that joint accountability achievement report, which would then be issued for the following roughly same time. I don't know if there's a difference in time period of when they receive theirs versus us, but in that November timeframe, which is typically, right, some time when we get ours. Is that
So we
is that
had
true?
it, I mean, I was under the impression that it would happen in the next year, but that would put it at 1.5 years. So maybe that's.
No,
Yeah, I was
because
gonna
they
say, I
wanted
don't
to make sure that they wanted to, the park implementation. And I think that's, I mean, one of the comments I have is I feel strongly that it would be great to test the waters in this next year with a common joint program evaluation, not the entire achievement report, but, pick a specific program or area. Maybe it's obviously around the joint literacy goal. I don't know what the answer is, but to organizationally test our fortitude of bringing that together, because it's no small feat that's going to, go into effect. So maybe in this year we could use it as a time to pick one specific area to jointly report on, and then the full report.
And I think you're right, literacy would be an obvious choice. Ellen?
I just know that there's a lot of concern about parks since we haven't ever given it before. And I think teachers feel that part of this year will be baseline, and it'll help us get a better handle on it. And I'm not sure that you're going to get the data that you need to think about it the way you're thinking about it. I'd almost rather have it be look at what does our baseline data tell us, and where are we going to move forward from there.
In a joint?
But can't we do it?
We could look at it jointly, but I think, just picking it to then, what are you going to do with it? If you pick that as your goal, then what's the purpose of doing that? What do you hope to get from that? And to just, I think, be aware that teachers are very nervous about this as a first time out.
Well, and that's, part of what we have to do initially with the joint literacy goal is set a baselines for each of these objectives. So, and to clarify, I wasn't thinking of it as much, I think the output is important, but as much the process and the collaboration and learning, the learnings that we would gain through doing it on a just slightly less expansive view to then leap into, the entire piece. So it's as much an implementation kind of benefit as it is an outcome benefit.
I think it would help the teachers to hear you say how you want to use it and view it. I think that would really help.
I'm a little bit confused as to which teachers are threatened by this report.
I think I think they're not threatened by the report. I think they're anxious to experience it one time through with the kids, to really see all the parts of the test and how it plays out. We don't even know, for example, yet whether it's going to be technology-based or it's going to be paper pencil. There's a lot of questions in the state around, do districts downstate have the technology they need to be able to administer it? And then
They're
will it
worried
be?
about the unfamiliarity of what the test is going to be.
That's what I'm saying. So,
Okay.
But those are two
I wasn't-
separate
That's
issues.
too, I was going to say, that shouldn't prohibit, though,
No,
from
no.
looking at it of how would we report this jointly. That's separate from what the
that's
actual data is
right.
going to show
That's what I was
us.
trying to clarify, how it would be
Yeah,
used and
it's
what.
not any more threatening to do it K through 12 than
Right,
you're
than it
just
is to
talking
K
about the
through 8.
newness of the
Right.
test and what that data.
Right.
I just think the sensitivity, the point is the sensitivity of the conversation
Yeah.
this year as we go
I
forth with all the new
understand
testing is the real issue, yeah.
And then the other, I mean, I think it's fine and it's easy enough to add something into our policy about that it's going to be a joint report, but the more complicated piece is the data sharing.
And that's, at the next committee meeting, they also are coming up with some language about how we come up with it.
So that's going to require another policy change, right?
Laura has
For
a comment.
both?
I just wanted to share that I have been emailing back and forth with Carrie at the high school regarding the data share agreement, and we have a conference call with the attorney tomorrow
good.
scheduled
Oh, great.
for that.
Oh, I mean, are we thinking about just having it like an anonymous data?
That was the information that I had shared back, that right now, even without an agreement in place, they can share data that does not identify the students. But if we're wanting to do program evaluations or anything else with that data, we really need it to be identified by student ID in order for us to do that.
And even a
So,
student ID is enough,
Yeah, that's considered
even if the student ID
identifiable.
is shared without the personally identifiable information related to that ID, is that still, that would require,
Because, well, if we use this, like the district ID, that's what we use and could link up
And they
with other
take that ID with
information.
them into high school, don't they?
Yes, they do.
oh, they do, okay.
So,
We now have a joint, yeah.
That's good.
Gotcha.
so we have looked at some, like I shared some sample language, and like I said, we're going to have the conference call with the attorney tomorrow, so we can kind of flesh out some more of that, so that we can come, hopefully, to some agreement that allows for it to include that information, because it just makes it more valuable for us.
Right.
That's great, and we have a meeting on the May 22nd where we'll be talking about it. And how do you formalize something? Is it a legal agreement, or is it just?
To my knowledge, it would just be an agreement that would be signed by all parties. It's not like anything that has to be
Yeah, right.
notarized or anything else.
So we don't have to do it, that doesn't
Yeah,
have
it's like
a policy
memorandum of
impact.
No,
understanding.
so it's just, it's separate, so we'll have two different components. One is the policy change for the board to be looking at a joint agreement, and then it's for the administration to have an inter-district agreement
yes.
among administrators.
But I'll just throw out, though, that may, and this is more of a question for the lawyers, because I don't know exactly what the procedures are right now, but there could be, if we're sharing, especially like student IDs with the high school, although maybe not because it's the same ID that they get into high school, there may have to be some, like upon, we might have to change like the registration form to just add like a little tick box that permits that sharing.
I think what we're hoping to do is to be able to put something in place that would not require that parental consent. And if the parental consent was required, that would be going on a form at the high school that they're having the families fill out. Because we can share all of our information up, because they're now serving our students. For any student that that attends the high school that was once our student. It's just the information coming back to us is where the issue is.
Interesting.
Laura, for how many years have they had the same ID? Did that change?
No, that goes back to when I first started with the district.
Which
So
was
that's
how
been in
long?
place for a very long time. Well, no, ancient time. 14.
More than a time of the dinosaur. Pyramids. 14 years? 14 years?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, yeah.
Okay.
At least.
So, I mean, so that should give us, then we'd have, for programs that, that have been around for a while, we would be able to look at.
Well, I think that's probably more of an implementation question that does have to be sorted out separately, is are we looking at purely
Backwards, yeah,
forward-looking, or are we are we looking at data that,
That is
on
important.
mutual students
That's part of
now?
this whole discussion.
Yeah,
Which
that's
would be
something that has to be
important
sorted
to
out.
get.
Because if we're going to
Historical
implement
data.
it on, programs that are currently in play and look backward, then we would need to be able to, not just the students that are moving up and starting from this baseline, but going backwards, so.
So historical data as well.
And I like your suggestion of whatever is appropriate to have a phased approach so that we can get our arms around it. That seems reasonable.
So what I'm hoping will happen at the policy meeting next week, we could introduce this change.
Yeah.
And then we're hoping to both boards to vote on that for the June meeting for the policy change. So it'll be a second viewing in the policy meeting.
Okay.
Which sort of introduces the next discussion item, unless anyone has anything besides the phased approach, which I agree with also. If you reread the report, I'm not sure if not everyone was at the meeting when the Kellogg students presented, but there seemed to be a lot of good ideas and ideas that seemed, as we like to say, low-hanging fruit, some things that wouldn't be that difficult to approach. And we as a board, and so we'd love your response to this, but it's sort of as a board strategy, do we kind of come up with these ideas of setting different goals or changing policy to enact some of these changes that we think are smart, or do we come up with more of a strategic approach to the virtual consolidation model, or are we still interested in it? Because at this point, it's sort of gone on a shelf, and we either need to decide to use it as a roadmap, or decide this isn't really the time that we want to pursue it. I just wanted to bring it back for another viewing to talk about that, so I wanted thoughts.
My view is that as we look at our goals for the next year, knowing that our strategic plan is wrapping up, and that we'll have a year where we don't have a strategic plan, but where we're actually developing one, that we as a board need to identify what our priorities will be for Dr. Gorin when he comes in. And this could be one of those priorities, whether and it could fall on anywhere on the spectrum of having him and his team decide what priorities they think we should focus on based on this report, or having us decide and, with him and giving some direction around which areas we think we could focus on, if we think it's a priority, knowing that there are probably some other priorities that might be top of the list for next year. But I feel like we need to sort that out with him in some way to figure out where we want to head. My personal preference is to either the board or the board and administration or some group pick some areas to focus on to try to move forward. But I think we have to see what we want to put on the plate for next year.
I almost feel like the whole idea of virtual consolidation, which I think has been repeatedly expressed at the board level, from both boards, from the community, as something that we need to do more of and look more into. I feel like that whole concept almost deserves its own strategic planning process. And so maybe something out of the joint committee, having some sort of having another either subcommittee of the joint committee, something with the two districts, some group consisting of members of both districts, coming up over the next year with here's a plan of how what would be reasonable to get to, what's a good timeline of goals to get there, and do its own sort of strategic planning.
And I think some of that work Kellogg very nicely did.
Right, they've done some of it for us, but I
So
think
it-
now our joint districts need to figure out, well, what do we want to take from this, and what do we
Exactly.
think is reasonable to implement, and what's a reasonable timeframe to
I'm
implement
hearing
that.
you
I
say
don't
that
know
you
that-
wouldn't want to just shelve it, you'd want to.
No, I don't think we should shelve it. I mean, I think we have this information here, and it's a good starting point, but
Yeah.
now it's up to us to come in and figure out what to do with it.
Is it a matter of using some of the existing structures we have, like the joint committee, along with the administration?
Yeah.
To look at this, we sort of had it, we asked some questions, and then that was really it. But if the next step is to use the joint committee along with the administration to collaboratively identify where do we think we can focus, as
I mean,
opposed to
it's
like
like,
a
yeah.
whole separate strategic planning process, using this as the launching point.
Right, I'm just saying having some other separate group that really focuses on this for the year.
I think-
Like how we're going to
Yeah.
proceed with this. What can we do with this information now that we have it?
And I think I do like what you're saying, because I do think the committee is the place where this work would logically fall. And yet, I think as our board, we need to give people on the committee a roadmap of where we'd like to see that go, because it's a little bit, we're making it up as we go along. And I do think we haven't done anything that the board would be, this joint goal isn't surprising anyone for the achievement report. But what I'm bringing back to you is I'd like a discussion on the board of what your priorities are from the report, so then we can use that to prioritize our work for next year. Because I can come up with it myself, but I want to be speaking for the board when I say this is what we'd like
Got
to
it.
see.
So just as an example, if one were excited about the joint professional development,
Yes.
formative assessments, you thought, oh boy, that would really further us in achieving the joint literacy goal.
Yeah.
Just to bring that up and say that should be part of it.
Exactly. Maybe tonight, we're not all prepared to have that conversation, but at some point, I'd like to have that conversation. So as I'm meeting with Gretchen and we're mapping out for next year what we'd like to accomplish, that I know what the priorities are from your point. And if you all want to delay that conversation and say you want to reflect on that, and we'll have it later on, that's also fine with me. Whichever you feel comfortable
Yes.
with. Yes, you want to delay that.
I do.
That's because you want to leave by 7:30.
No, it's not. It's that I misunderstood what the purpose of the topic was.
Right. Okay.
And so
You haven't thought, well, that's good.
I want to give that some more thought.
Okay, and you all agree?
No, I agree with that too, and I also just would put out there, though, that I can look at this and think, oh, these seem like great opportunities, but I think there's a certain amount of administrative input that we need.
That's what I was wanting. I mean,
Okay.
tonight, they said, do you want anyone, we don't want you to do any work for tonight, but we did want to hear your thoughts on it. But maybe that's for the conversation when we start prioritizing our recommendations.
And I think if Dr. Gorin weighs in on that as well, that would be really
Okay.
important.
Yeah.
That's just
Right.
think in conjunction with the organizational analysis that he's going to likely do, as he's learning about the organization, it makes sense that he would then come away with some conclusions around where is there opportunity for us to grow capacity, do better through some of these consolidation pieces, because I mean, for me personally, I think the committee has latched on to what is the biggest opportunity, which is, looking at it from a student success perspective. I think we can probably peel the onion a little bit more with respect to that, but we're making tangible steps, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, I think the committee's doing great work. Now it's about looking at the inner workings of the organization and figuring out where the opportunities are. And from our vantage point, that's not something we should be experts
No.
on, right? So I do think that we need that kind of direction from Dr. Gorin. And where we come into play is quite frankly, from my perspective, it's not separate from the strategic planning. It is, what are those what is the vision, and then the priorities that are going to come out, whether it's key initiatives, focal areas, whatever we call them, out of this community process. And based on that, how can we better enable that through virtual consolidation? So these are, I mean, obvious components, but I think we will have even more, maybe meat on the bones when we get to that point of saying, okay, well, what are the 3 or 5 things we're really going to be about? Not that we're stopping much of anything, but, and then how, and this is one of the tools, you know, how can a tighter collaboration with 202 enable and bring that to fruition? So, I don't know.
And we probably have enough for the next year in the committee, although,
Well, the one thing that we didn't talk about here, or wasn't in this, that you also brought up, was the joint calendaring effort. I mean, it was one of the other options. So I was interested in kind of what the next steps.
the next step for
on
that is in May, we've asked them, both administrations, to bring a proposal of what that committee would look like. And I really do think the committee was interested in seeing a joint committee to start the kind of calendar discussions instead of deciding separately and then consulting after they'd been made. So that will be on May 22nd.
Yeah, I mean, I think from thinking about all the community discussions we've had thus far and where, you know, all of our important stakeholders, families, parents, everything are, you know, where are the obvious places? Those are the 2 obvious places, calendaring and joint data sharing and looking and, you know, creating a more common line of sight, I guess, across the student's experience, which has both a front page kind of effect, which is, you know, the portal idea and those things, but the backside of it is the student achievement. So,
Oh, good.
And, and that's why I'm also don't want us to forget about the professional development side,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if we're, you know, doing really well on articulation, then we're going to need to do joint professional development, at least maybe in some target
Right.
grade levels, that kind of thing. 8th and 9th, that sort of thing.
okay, but that wasn't really.
Do you have anything more to add, or are you?
No, I think there are already some efforts at joint PD that I think could easily be built upon and enhanced. So I think that is something, I think it's going to be important to bring the people in the districts that are going to do this work together so that it's a coordinated effort.
Yeah, and I think they have been talking a little bit.
They have been.
Yeah.
The department chairs.
Okay, well, I think we have enough, and I think probably we should have one more conversation about this, even if I know it's going to be folded into the strategic plan, but for next year, we want to have a robust schedule for the committee, because otherwise, there's not a lot of work to be done on that. I mean, there are always efforts, but the main thrust of it is the collaboration for the committee. Okay, so we're on to upcoming work. You had something about the June?
No, I just wanted to confirm that that June 16th meeting is not being held, is that correct?
We're canceling the June 16th
16th, okay.
meeting. So we'll have the 19th in May, which will be the welcome reception for Dr. Gorin from 6 to 7:30 here at JEH, and we are, I'm probably stealing your communication, but we're inviting the community to that. We're very eager to have people join us for that. And then the next meeting will be June 2nd, and then we won't have one on the 16th. And then the joint meeting will be on the 23rd. So that's our schedule for the next 3 weeks, or 3 meetings. And then did you want, and then just the announcement about the welcome reception?
Sure. The community welcome reception's on Monday, May 19th from 6 to 7:30 here at JEH. And then the staff welcome reception is on Wednesday, May 21st from 4 to 5:30 here at JEH.
Great. And then we'll informal presentations from the public.
Laura, it's your turn.
And if there are no further
like
matters
another
to
30 minutes.
be presented to the board, I find this meeting adjourned.